We're good. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Wednesday, April 24th, a regularly scheduled meeting of the ATC or Advisory Technical Committee of the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. Can we have a roll call, please?
Absolutely. Bolinas Fire District, City of Mill Valley,
Here.
City of San Rafael,
Here.
City of Larkspur,
Here.
County Marin Fire, Inverness Fire, Kentfield Fire. Oh, Inverness is here.
Yes.
Kentfield Fire, Marinwood Community Services District, Muir Beach Community Services District,
Present.
Novato Fire District,
Here.
Sleepy Hollow Fire District,
Present.
Southern Marin Fire,
Here.
Stinson Beach Fire,
Here.
Town of Corte Madera,
Here.
Town of Fairfax,
Here.
Town of Ross,
Here.
Town of San Anselmo,
Here.
and now for the non-voting members, California State Parks,
Here.
Marin County Parks,
Here.
Marin Water,
Here.
National Park Service,
Here.
Pacific Gas and Electric, Ecologically Sound Practices,
Here.
UC Cooperative Extension,
Here.
Fire Safe Marin,
Here.
Point Reyes National Seashore. Marinwood is also here.
Okay, perfect. That makes a quorum. Thank you, everyone. This item number 3 is any agenda adjustments. Does anyone want to change anything from the posted agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 4. This is the time for open public expression. The public is welcome to address the Advisory Technical Committee at this time on matters that are not on the agenda that are within the jurisdiction of this committee. Please be advised that pursuant to Government Code Section 54954.2, the committee is not permitted to discuss or take actions on any matter not on the agenda. Comments may be no longer than 3 minutes and should be respectful to the community. Is there anyone in the public that would like to make a comment?
I see no hands raised at this time.
Okay, we'll go ahead and close public comment and bring it back to the committee. Item number 6, consent calendar. Actually, item number 5, planning and program managers report.
Great. I will keep this brief, but I do have a couple of slides here. I want to make sure all of you are aware that we have a special day today. We have administrative professionals kind of appreciation day. And here we rely very, very heavily on the folks who provide that kind of support. Martina Wilson, especially who's out there in the ethos listening in and helping out, wasn't able to be in today and hasn't been able to be here for a little while due to some medical issues, but we're looking forward to having her back soon and really appreciate all of the time and the effort that she puts in behind the scenes. You guys don't see her on camera much, but she has she's kind of the heart and soul of our staff meetings, and we really appreciate her and all of her hard work and all of her IT support getting these projects going. And I'm getting a whole bunch of texts from her right now. So if you have admin staff who are key to your work, I encourage you to reach out. And I also really appreciate Josh and other VMSs who've been stepping in while Martina is out. So we have a field trip coming up. This is the 3rd field trip to this particular project, the San Rafael San Anselmo Fuel Reduction Zone. sometimes called Cercifers or sassafras, depending on your mood. This is taking place May 6th from 1 to 3 p.m. This project has certainly gotten a lot of attention from neighbors and various stakeholders. It includes thinning and removal of small diameter eucalyptus trees and hazard trees. There's a lot going on in this area. We've gotten several acres implemented so far within the pilot project area. So we'd like to bring the public out to see the work in progress. So there will be, activities happening at the time, and a big thank you to Kate Anderson with Marin Wildfire, who's been coordinating with the contractor to make it a demonstration. So the contractor has done this before. There will be, equipment active and people able to watch from a safe distance. And we'll be talking through the project and showing our work. So as you can see, there are still a lot of trees in the area. This is not a clear cut. And we can talk about the project, talk about what's getting cut, what remains, and future plans. So encourage all of you guys to join us. We can also accommodate needs. So this field trip, much like the last one, will be live streamed. So if you're not able to join in person, you can watch on Facebook, and we'll also be posting that link later on. We can also accommodate ADA needs and just coordinate with us ahead of time. And we did that previously and it worked out just fine, being able to get a vehicle up to the top of the hill. And then we'll also have a vehicle to drive folks up who do not feel comfortable walking up the hill. So big opportunities to join us on that day. We hope to get a really big turnout we have in the past. So, all right. So I wanted to let you guys know that, or maybe remind you, because I've probably talked about this before, but we are working on a public-facing web map of all of our core vegetation management projects. We'd really like to release this map, make it public in May. So we're gathering data, we're gathering polygons and photos and descriptions of each of the projects. So you or your staff may have received emails from me and maybe links to Google Drives to collect photos and things like that. Just keep an eye out for emails. If you have great photos of your project areas, please do send them my way. Whatever projects we don't have photos of, MWPA staff will go out and take some photos and we'll add that to the mix. So your help would be great on that. This map also will be used in the future to track, where crews might be working that season, probably be displaying implementation polygons too, so we can show where work has taken place. So this map is going to grow and transform as we start collecting more data. And that leads me to this slide. This is my last slide for this portion of the agenda. I just want to note that we are working really hard with our GIS folks, with various contractors, and with our member agencies to create a data collection and monitoring program. We're kind of triaging this effort so that in the very beginning, we're at least collecting all the data related to project implementation in a uniform way, so we can better report out on our metrics, acres implemented, miles treated, what activities happening where, collecting photo points, things like that. So we can track projects over time more easily and then feed some of that information back into our risk modeling. So we're going to take a triage kind of approach, do the really essential things first, and then work into the other things that may require some partnerships and some additional brainstorming to make work. So you may hear about that from your staff. Please feel free to reach out. We're building it, little by little and with a lot of input from all of our member agencies. So we encourage any and all opinions about that, and any concerns or questions, please feel free to reach out. And that's it for my report. Happy to take questions.
Any questions for the program manager? Seeing none, we will move on. Thank you, man. Appreciate it. Move on to item number 6, which is the consent calendar. This is the opportunity for the public to comment on a consent agenda items that will occur prior to the committee's discussion of the consent agenda. The committee may approve the entire consent agenda with one action. The only thing I see is 6A, which are the minutes of our April 3rd meeting. With that, hopefully everyone had an opportunity to read them, and if you have, I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve the minutes. Todd Lando, Corder Madera moves to approve.
So we have a first from Todd Lando with Corder Madera. Do we have a second?
I'll second that motion.
We have a second from Rob Bastian with Sleepy Hollow. May we have a vote, please?
Salinas Fire District, City of Mill Valley,
Yes.
City of San Rafael,
Yes.
City of Larkspur,
Yes.
County Marin Fire, Inverness Fire,
Yes.
Kentfield Fire, Marin Wood Community Services District, Muir Beach Community Services District.
Yep.
Nevada Fire District,
Yes.
Sleepy Hollow Fire,
Yes.
Southern Marin Fire,
Yes.
Stimson Beach Fire,
Yes.
Town of Corte Madera,
Yes.
Town of Fairfax,
Yes.
Town of Ross,
Yes.
Town of San Anselmo.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you, everyone. Moving on to item number 7. 7A is the draft fiscal year 2024-2025 work plan and budget. Do we have a report?
Yes, I will share my screen here. Great. Okay, so this is really the meat and the potatoes of our meeting today. My presentation is going to be fairly short because I want to make sure there's plenty of room for discussion and questions. So today, what I'll do is just go through some of the slides that you've seen before, the process, the timeline, the milestones, review the current status with you guys. And then we'll definitely want to discuss the priority funding and the typo, ad hoc subcommittee activities. Plenty of time for discussions. And today is a day where we need to take a vote and make some decisions as a committee. Then I want to note that there's more coordination and communication possible just because this is the last ATC meeting of the season. Doesn't mean you don't have more opportunities to share your thoughts on the work plan and budget. The Ops Committee will meet again May 2nd, and the Ops Ad Hoc Committee will meet probably before May 2nd to continue discussing. So just to review, you've seen this slide before. We've done a lot. We started meeting in December. We created new chair and vice chair positions. We submitted JPA-wide projects and zone-specific projects into the portal. We presented all of those projects in public meetings. We've had several meetings of ATC and Ops ad hoc subcommittees. And then next steps will include May 2nd, the Ops Committee meeting to discuss the work plan and budget. And the Ops Committee, as you know, their role is to finalize that budget. And then the Board of Directors will be considering the work plan and budget on May 16th. So here's a slide with the overall budget as we are now. Every March, the MWPA board approves an adjustment to the Measure C tax levy based on the CPI. And that CPI is February through February. That's written in the ordinance language or the JPA language. So we get that information February through February, sometime in March. And then we have a little bit of time to react, go to the board, get approval for some sort of change, up to 3% increase. But no more than that. And it's really based on the CPI. The CPI this time around was 2.4% February through February. Up until then, it was looking a little bit different. So we were going off 2.6% January through January, and then needed to change these overall budget numbers once we knew it was 2.4%. So these numbers have changed over the course of the meeting of the ATC because of that. And then the board approved that March 21. And so that gives us an estimated revenue for fiscal year 24-25 of $21,907,664. And that's at the top of the slide here. And then all these numbers are calculated based on that overall estimated revenue. So the D-space and the local, those are easy because they are just 20% and based on what each agency takes from that 20%. Those numbers really don't change much. And then the right-hand columns are the core budget, and that is more complicated, as you know. So 60% of the overall budget goes to core, then we subtract out admin, which is 10% of that 60%. Then we subtract out the JPA-wide budget share for each zone. And then we get down to the 100% of core and 80% of core for each zone. So we've been, as you know, playing around with those numbers in terms of budgeting for project proposals, et cetera, trying to determine what the pathway is going to be for this year, considering the 20% priority funding. So, and I'll talk a little bit more about that and just kind of review that in a future slide. So each year, the Operations Committee provides some guidance for the ATC in developing the work plan. Previous guidance was a little simpler, fewer bullets on the list. This year, the Operations Committee wanted to make some modifications. So just to review what this year's guidance is, it's on the slide. I'll just summarize very quickly. Of course, we're continuing the house out approach. We're continuing to reduce wildfire risk to communities by providing resources directly to residents for home hardening and defensible space activities. We're really prioritizing shaded fuel breaks and fuel reduction projects directly adjacent to communities. But we're also open to looking at strategically placed landscape area treatments or splats and looking at pathways modeling to help inform project locations and how fire might move across the landscape. Expanding the use of prescribed fire is a priority as much as the opportunities are out there, and the public education around prescribed fire is really important. It's an important component of that. We're going to continue to prioritize evacuation planning and projects. As you know, that's a portion of the JPA-wide budget. It's really key. This is keeping people safe in evacuations and allowing first responders to get in. It's a key component of what we do. We're also partnering with insurance companies and the IBHS who help avoid folks from losing their insurance or getting out of control bills from insurance companies. So really diving into, Mark has been working on this more than I, of course, diving into this and looking for opportunities and ways to what the nexus is between, say, the modeling and this sort of work. Public education continues to be a really key component of what we do. Public education in terms of reaching out to new audiences, folks who aren't showing up to all the public meetings, for instance. But also the new guidance includes some caveats there. So Zone 0, home hardening and defensible space actions that fire agencies and residents can take to be safer. Evacuation, really digging into that. And then reducing human-caused ignitions. So those were discussions that happened at the Operations Committee level over a couple of different meetings. And this reflects the input from the Operations Committee. And I think that this year's work plan really does reflect all of these different strategies. So just to review, the list of JPA-wide proposals included in this year's work plan has not changed. A couple of numbers have changed a little bit. I moved a little bit of funding from environmental compliance over to the VMS positions, moved about 20,000 from one budget into the other, but the overall budget has not changed. So you've heard presentations on all of these proposals, and many of them are repeats from previous years. And so I won't go into them here, but we do have resources if you'd like me to send you slides or other information about these. They're all available online in the web portal for anybody who is listening and wants to dig into any of these topics. And then zone-specific proposals, we all heard presentations really from each other and our staff on all of these proposals that everyone took the time and energy to enter into the portal. So thank you all again for your efforts there. Just a few highlights. So most proposals are really repeats of previous years, but a few highlights that are new are included in this slide, and that includes some fuel reduction efforts at a Boy Scout and Girl Scout camp, Camp Tamarancho. That's in the Central Marin Zone. In West Marin, some new projects in the Stinson Beach area, some fire road improvements, and some public education materials. In Novato Zone, a residential grant program to support veg removal in Zone 0, so really digging into Zone 0. Santa Fe Zone, additional targeted assistance for residents, and some new fuel reduction work in the Deer Valley area. Southern Marin Zone, several new projects and proposals, including a new fire-safe garden, shaded fuel break next to homes in the Strawberry or Alto neighborhood, a new direct assistance program, some red flag warning signs, additional emergency notification network installations, and some more support for Muir Beach's Firewise community. So I wanted to note, we've had various members of the operations committee and the ATC really step up and help with some of these discussions, really dig into the JPA-wide proposals and the zone-specific proposals and how to handle the 20% priority funding options. Here are listed the operations committee ad hoc subcommittee members. So I just want to note, our goal is to remain under a quorum for these subcommittees, but really try to include as many folks from different zones as possible. The ops committee ad hoc subcommittee met 3 times, one on March 22nd to discuss JPA-wide proposals, again on April 16th to discuss zone-specific proposals, and then on the 23rd to discuss that 20% priority funding and come up with some thoughts on how to tackle that. The ATC ad hoc subcommittee members included more people in alphabetical order here: Fred Hilliard, Jordan Reeser, Larry Passero, Lynn Osgood, Quinn Gardner, Robert Bastion, Ruben Martin, and Todd Lando. A big thank you to all of you for participating in all of that. We met 3 times, including March 21st to discuss JPA-wide proposals, April 11th to discuss zone-specific proposals, and the 23rd, just the other day, to discuss the 20% priority funding. So we discussed a lot of topics during that time, and I want to invite members of the ad hoc subcommittee to provide their thoughts on some of the topics discussed. And I'm going to give a little background, maybe before we do, a little background on the 20% priority funding and where that came from. And then I'm just giving a preview of the slides. And then I'm going to ask you guys to provide your kind of report out from the ATC ad hoc subcommittee on any of the topics, that we discussed, but probably especially the 20% priority funding. So very quickly, the 20% priority funding is really coming from the JPA language where 80% of the revenue generated within any particular zone needs to be spent within that zone, averaged over 5 years. The remaining 20% we have some flexibility with. So the idea there is to think kind of regionally about how to allocate that money for the greatest benefit. Some zones will have financial needs in any given year, and that might change from year to year. And maybe that West Marin has a lot of need next year, but maybe not the year after. So maybe another project somewhere else is a really big highlight in some other zone and needs some additional financial assistance. And so the 20% provides some flexibility to think across zone boundaries. So last year, I believe it was, the ATC came up with or helped me develop a list of kind of guidance ideas around that 20%. So we reviewed this, I think it was last year, to help guide that discussion. You'll notice that some of those bullet points are related to, data out there, fire hazard severity maps, but also studies, surveys, tools that are science-based and data-driven, and how do we incorporate that into the decision-making process. So these are all, and then one of the bullets is referencing the larger projects, which are expensive to implement and might need a boost from time to time. My last bullet on this slide is in reference to maybe going back and revising this priority funding guidance for the group. Does it make sense for the ATC ad hoc to maybe meet during the off season to discuss this more fully now that we have tools and data available to help guide this decision-making process? But I think it would take some time and some effort and digging into all of that to come up with a methodology that works for us. So, so that's one point I'd like the group to consider today. And then with that, I'm hoping that the ATC ad hoc can chime in and provide your thoughts on any of the topics raised right now. Now would be a good time.
We had a robust discussion on the 23rd, looking at a concept that Ann presented to us. It was based largely on some modeling work that had been done by Willow Labs, who we work with all the time and have great faith in their ability to review data, to perform some fantastic modeling analysis. What we saw in the presentation was prepared relatively quickly by them with working with Charlotte Jourdain. It was an interesting approach. It was good in some senses, at least. But what we found in our discussion was that the modeling in this case, which would be used to help determine the allocation of that 20% funding to a variety of projects, we were, almost immediately able to pick some issues with it. The approach was probably a little bit rushed, no fault of anybody, but we felt as a committee that there were other, other inputs that needed to be taken into account in the modeling. A summary is that we felt that they put too much weight towards a 97th percentile weather scenario when modeling potential fire runs at the fuel breaks. The modeling looked pretty extensively. It was obvious looking at the results of the modeling that they had heavily weighted evacuation route preparedness and evacuation route conditions based on the evacuation route analysis that was done by the MWPA. But as we discussed this as the ad hoc committee, we realized that the shaded fuel breaks, the near community shaded fuel breaks, are totally disconnected from evacuation route discussions. They weren't designed to improve evacuation preparedness, except maybe peripherally. They weren't designed to reduce impacts on evacuation routes, whether it be traffic congestion or heat and smoke impingement on roadways. So when the analysis and the modeling incorporated those results, we found that the results just didn't necessarily reflect reality from the group's experience on where funding should be provided. Well, I think we all agreed that it was a unique exercise and that we want to see more of that in the future. And we would like an opportunity for the ad hoc committee or the ATC as a whole to have input into the inputs and the data that's used in that modeling going forward. And we probably need to sit down with Willow Labs and Charlotte and look at multiple results using different scenarios and different inputs before a decision is made on an approach where we could simply rely on modeling to allocate funds to these projects. So ultimately, we decided as a group that we felt that we should not use the modeling results that for the allocation this time around, that we should begin work immediately with the Willow Labs or whatever approach we take to make that data-driven analysis that we want for the 24-25 but I'm sorry, the 25-26 budget year. So we should start work now. That gives us a year to work with them to look at the data, come up with a better analysis, and with the goal of using that type of tool for the next budget year. But we simply felt we're not prepared to accept the results of the modeling right now. So that hope that makes sense to folks. If anybody on the ad hoc committee wants to add clarity.
And I'll just add a little bit of context. So thank you for that. That was a really good summary of the discussion. The reason why we went down this road was because the operations ad hoc subcommittee just a few days prior had suggested looking at the tools and coming up with some sort of kind of draft methodology to very quickly, literally turned it around about 48 hours, use available modeling and data to take a first look at the top 3 kind of very big, expensive projects. So Greater Novato Shaded Fuel Break, Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break, and San Rafael, San Anselmo Fuel Reduction Zone. So what might that look like given what's available right now? And so this was a very quick kind of back of the envelope analysis based on mostly the evacuation ingress egress tool. I think what came out of this discussion is we want to really dig into the models and then also integrate all the different efforts. So Willow Labs work, the evacuation ingress egress work, and the fire side, on parcel analysis as well. So how do we package those up as kind of one complete effort to take a look at a science-based approach?
Yeah, that summarizes the meeting on the 23rd. Quinn, you had a
Yeah, I just wanted to take a minute and just really appreciate you, Anne. I think all these ad hoc meetings we've had some really robust discussions, as Todd alluded to, and you've been juggling a lot, and I just want to appreciate that and appreciate, I think all the ad hocs have really not started, but have put a lot of, there's been a lot of good conversations and a lot of different viewpoints, and we have 17 member agencies, and I don't think we should expect anything less, and you've been stuck in the middle navigating it all, and I just want to acknowledge that and appreciate that. I think that, we had some good conversations here, and I think that at the end of the day, what it really kind of alludes to is we're all trying to find compromise and strategic work that works for the county as a whole, while also being able to do things that make sense locally for us. And I think making sense locally for us is what we know to be true on the ground, as well as how we want to prioritize funding, and as well as our staffing capabilities, which really do vary across the county. And so I think that while we try to come up with really clean budget ideas, and your summary slides prior to this, I think, summarized really complex budgeting processes really simply and well, and I appreciate that as well. That I'm not sure there is a simple budget process here because of everybody's needs. And, hopefully today and through the rest of this process, we can really figure out what the numbers are that let the tax measure do what I think was overall intended to do at the local and at the countywide level. And that's no small task, and appreciate your and all of staff's work on that.
Well said.
very well said, Mike, and I think we can all echo those comments for both you and all of your staff members. It definitely takes a lot of work. Was that the end of your report, Anne, or do you have more?
Let me check my slide deck.
Okay.
That'll tell me. All right, one more slide. So just to summarize what we're doing today. So staff recommendation is that the ATC receive a summary. We've done that. Provide feedback. We can continue doing that, and make recommendations for the operations committee. So the operations committee will finalize the work plan and budget. So we don't need to have all the budget numbers finalized today. And as you saw in the attachments to the staff report, the budget numbers are still draft. They don't have to be finished today, but it would be great to have those numbers by the end of this week so I can include them in my staff reports to the operations committee. So we're going to make recommendations to the operations committee today. And we can make recommendations according to what the ATC would like to see in terms of the priority funding. And that doesn't mean that the conversation needs to stop here for the ATC. You can continue providing your input as the operations committee works to make final decisions on budget numbers and proposals. So that's what's up for grabs today in terms of activities and what our kind of obligations are. And that timeline is pretty tight. You know, we need to approve the work plan and budget by June 1st, I think, of each year. And that's non-negotiable. It's written in the language. So, and the last thing I want to say is a big thank you to everybody here who has been participating, who's been, you know, dealing with all my emails, attachments, agendas, showing up. And I want to acknowledge that this effort really is not easy. This is 17 different agencies with 17 different perspectives, plus the MWPA with, you know, our perspectives and our needs. And it's a collaboration that shows that we can do really big things working together, much larger than any one of us could do individually. So I want to thank you all for all of your efforts and open it up to discussion.
Okay, does anybody have any questions or comments for staff?
I know Bella's had her hands raised for a while, so I just want to.
Anyone in the room?
No.
Seeing none, okay, we'll go now to our virtual audience. Belle, you're muted.
We can't hear you, Belle.
How about now? Can you hear?
Yeah,
Yes.
we've got you.
Okay, it's a different, it's about the 20% priority funding. And someone asked me this question, I thought it was worth raising, which is, there was a time, was it last year or recently, where there was a kind of commitment that the 20% that the funding we're talking about would go to West Marin because of their underfunding and the demands they had on their infrastructure and other things. And I just wondered how to answer that question. Is there a change in theory, or is the demand less, or could anyone comment on that?
Sure, I can comment on that. You're absolutely right. West Marin is receiving far less funding than other zones. And so the need is pretty great in West Marin. It's a lot of land area. It's very expensive from an environmental regulatory standpoint to implement anything in the coastal zone. We are going through many, many months, if not years, of Coastal Act compliance efforts to do any new work in the coastal zone. Plus, we will be going through CEQA compliance as well. That process is taking so long that there won't likely be any projects ready to implement for the next fiscal year, resulting from that environmental compliance process. So that's why no specific projects are up for the 20% priority funding right now. We did allocate $200,000 to West Marin last year for that reason. We had a permit through the county to do certain work in the coastal zone. And so there was work being implemented in the coastal zone, and then work needed to start on all the compliance effort in the coastal zone for the next phase, the next wish list of items. And so we are using that $200,000 right now to coordinate with our consultants, with the various member agencies in the coastal zone, with the Coastal Commission. So we are just starting up again monthly coordination meetings with the California Coastal Commission and the County Planning Department and many others to discuss our path forward. So yes, that is absolutely true. And I think it'll come up again in the next fiscal year.
Thanks.
Do we have any other questions or comments from members online? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the committee for discussion. Does anybody have any comments, questions, concerns regarding the 24-25 work plan?
I have a point of clarification. I'm wondering if the ATC ad hoc can clarify what they'd like how they'd like to allocate that 20% priority funding. We talked about the reasoning for not going with any of the kind of potential scenarios that we discussed, but do you want to clarify what?
Yeah, so part of the 20% funding, we had a robust conversation the other day on from direction from the ops, as Todd and staff had alluded, is the conversation we felt that just utilizing fuel modeling and fire behavior modeling just alone for the 20% priority was only looking at one slice of the pie. When you start looking at everything that goes involved with what the hazards are within a community. So we felt that, yes, we can utilize a portion of the modeling, but yet we should also try to bridge that gap with the reality of real life scenarios in the field. And so I believe we felt this year that we were going to reallocate the existing funding back to the 3 projects within the zone, was my understanding. And if I'm incorrect, members here of the ATC may correct me, but it was my understanding, go back to the 33% to each priority 3 shaded fuel breaks that were already proposed, with a recommendation to reconvene the ad hoc committee for the remainder of this calendar year prior to the next fiscal year or prior to the next operating year, which is the 25-26 year. So we can then start utilizing and diving deeper into the methodology utilizing fuel modeling. And so that was kind of the clarification on what the recommendation was.
Great, thank you for clarifying.
Hey, Ann, this is Jordan. I just, maybe from the emails we had, and Ruben, thanks for that. Well, are we going to be asked to vote today? I thought that from the direction from the ad hoc, it's a lot of words here, the ad hoc ops group was to not allocate the funds to the 3 projects, but to just redistribute the funds based on where the funds were generated from the tax back to the zones in individual. So each zone would get an increase in their core for this year. So maybe I'm hearing 2 different things. Just want to clarify.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Jordan. So the ATC ad hoc subcommittee is recommending at this point that the 20% be allocated evenly among the 3 large projects. The operations ad hoc subcommittee also met yesterday to discuss the results of the GIS analysis and came up with a different recommendation that they'll likely be presenting to the full operations committee on the 2nd. So that ad hoc subcommittee recommended that because there are multiple shovel-ready projects in each zone, the 20% just be sent back to the zones in the amount that it would have arrived as if all zones were 100% core funded. So I guess those are, that's a point of discussion for the ATC to determine if the ATC would like to maintain the current recommendation from the ATC ad hoc or modify it in some way to reflect the operations committee or not. It's really up to you.
Thanks for the clarification, Ann, and thank you, Jordan, for clarifying that. So I guess what the discussion would be is if we as an ATC feel that the 3 main shaded fuel breaks are a priority, or do we want to reallocate whatever existing funds that would have been collected within your operating zone back to the zone? So that's the discussion here today that we would then pass along to the ops committee.
And this is Jordan. I can maybe just chime my thoughts on that is when we had the original discussion, it was more how we were going to allocate the 20% to what projects. We didn't really have that discussion, right? Of that's not an option that we would just reallocate the funds back to the zones. So I don't feel like we had that discussion prior. I'm in support of either or. I mean, I think obviously probably from a West Marin perspective, we can use all the money we can get, and none of the funds this year are allocated, for a priority project out there. So, if we had an additional dollar amount added to our current projects to continue our evacuation route and our other core projects, it would be much appreciated for, just citizens out there, but we'd also be happy to support the bigger cause. So.
Yeah, I would just say that my feeling on the ad hoc committee, we didn't consider that option. We did, for whatever reason, we just didn't see it as an option on the table. The fact that the ops committee pushed that option back to us, I think I would support that, for the reasons Jordan just said. It doesn't take any of the West Marin limited core funds and apply it to other projects, and we'd still be able individually as the other zones to apply it to the fuel break projects that we're all actively working on. So feels like the most fair approach.
Len, do you have any comments?
I agree with you, Todd, on that level. I mean, granted, we would all benefit, the three, with the large priority projects, we would benefit from the priority funding. But in all fairness, the zones that don't have that amount of money that we have would definitely benefit getting that 20% back. And I think this will give us an opportunity as well to have some conversations in the future and look at fuel modeling and our own basic knowledge of our community and the things that we face in our communities, because we know our evacuation routes, we know our vegetation types, we know the people that live there, and we know the scenarios and difficulties that people may have evacuating some of our neighborhoods. So I would support the 20% going back.
Rob or Marshall?
I feel the redistribution of the 20% back to the original zones. A lot of people did not put in projects based on those three major projects that we discussed, but everybody has shovel-ready projects already in their zones, and the 20% redistribution would be a fair thing throughout the group.
And I concur with a lot of what's said. The 20% redistribution would be able to be directed directly to those shovel-ready projects and utilized by each individual agency based on, historical knowledge and the project knowledge that we have been working on for the last few years to get to this point.
San Anselmo or Ross?
I don't have as much background as everyone else, but I would agree with what everybody said so far about just reallocating to the zones based on contributions from those zones.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm in agreement with the group to reallocate it.
Quinn?
I don't disagree with reallocating the 20%. I think the consequence for that specifically to the San Anselmo shaded fuel break is that because we put it forward as a priority project, San Anselmo did not put any money towards that project within their core budget. So that creates a challenge that we just need to overcome, and whether San Anselmo can then allocate some money towards that project so we can get the project dollars back to being whole. And I know that's the Ross Valley Greater Shore Break is also spanning multiple jurisdictions in the same way, although every one of those jurisdictions, I believe, is putting in towards it. So I think that's just kind of a complication. And I think that does reflect the benefit of the priority funding, as it simplifies some of those cross-jurisdictional boundary projects, as we all just agree they're important and we can put money into them. So I'm not opposed to the 20%, but I think it does shift things. And ultimately that is a 13%, right, net difference. No, that's not entirely true because there's an extra equation in there, 25%. So it does overall lower the amount of money available back into our budget that's all going to go towards that project pretty much anyway. So, but I do just want to appreciate the thought that's gone into this and the analysis that's gone into this, and also just encourage us to do similar with some of the other things we're looking at funding within this budget cycle. And I know this particular round question is about the 20%, but I think as we have this budget discussion, also looking at some of the other numbers, because we're being asked to continuously give from our local budgets, I think, without necessarily having the same analysis done. And I think that's important. And I'm glad we did it on this project. And so if we turn around and say we're not going to give from local budgets, it's all going back because we don't feel like the analysis supported it coming out. Great. But let's do the same for some of the other bigger dollar figure projects that we're looking at on a JPA wide or other kind of function.
Inverness, do you have comments?
Yeah, I think I concur with Jordan, and I certainly see Quinn's point, but, I think we can revisit this, or maybe the ops ad hoc and the ATC ad hoc committees can get together and work on that jointly at some level to iron that out. But I would be in favor of the 20%. Just going back to the districts at least this year.
Thank you. Dr. Taylor?
Yeah, I think it makes sense, echoing what in particular Jordan had to say. And we can use it for sure.
I believe we had Fairfax on the line as well.
Sorry, everyone. Yeah, it's fine by me.
Okay. And did we still have Stinson on there?
Yes, and I would agree with going back reallocated.
Perfect. Member Wood?
Yeah, I would also agree with the group on that. Thanks.
Okay. Guess it leaves it up to me. Yeah, I see both sides of the coin on this one, in my comments. I definitely see the intent of the priority funding was to look at some of these bigger projects and or zones that do not have the immediate funding needed, or we know it'll benefit the entire county. At the same time, I realize that I've got my own personal interest because some of the shaded fuel breaks protect our own communities. However, I'm very sensitive to the needs of our neighbors out in West Marin that tend to have the most amount of hazards out there with the most amount of fuel and land available to burn. I think we definitely, as an ATC and ops ad hocs, need to come together and probably have a joint meeting so that way we can at least get on the same page of what our priorities, goals, and vision is for this priority funding, as opposed to the back and forth and not aligning. So my recommendation would be to reallocate the 20% back to the zones. And then I would implore that agencies that already have fuel breaks that are on the books, try to work with your partners so we can maximize the amount of where our dollars go, trying to, especially for San Anselmo and the Ross Valley with all the work that's gone on with San Rafael. The more we can collaborate, I think was the intent of this GPA-wide proposals. So my recommendation would be for this year alone, to send everything back to the existing zones where the dollars and tax monies was originated, with a deeper look through this winter or summer and winter and fall, so we can come up with a better plan for the 25-26 work plan. Do we need a vote on that recommendation?
No, you can include that in your recommendation at the end,
Okay.
the one vote.
And then, so the second half to that would be approving the 24 and 25 work plan, correct?
Yes, that's correct. So we can approve the work plan with the caveat that, we're still finalizing the budget numbers and playing around with those. You'll notice that the spreadsheet attached to the staff report, and that now that it's public, I can provide to everybody. You can, I include the 80% core budget and the 100% core budget. So just, budget to the 100% core budget in that spreadsheet, and then send it back to me, and I'll modify the overall document, and I can modify the web portal proposals as needed. So just let me know, and let's try to get that done by the end of the week.
Okay. Before we get to a vote, I believe I've got to take this to public comment. Like to open it up if there's any members in the audience here that would like to step up to the microphone and speak on the 24-25 work plan. Okay, seeing none, are there any members in our virtual audience that would like to comment on the 24-25 work plan?
I see no hands raised at this time.
Okay, we'll bring it back to the committee. One last round of comments, questions.
Chief, could we open it up to like a broader discussion on the JPA-wide portion of the funding?
Yes, absolutely. You want to lead it?
Sure. I have a few questions. And Steve, and I apologize, this one didn't hit me until I was I assumed it was in my email and it wasn't. I know previous years we've looked at the RFPs for the chipper days. What's the current daily rate on the chipper program?
So what we decided last year is to go with a contract style like a lot of
2
other,
years.
yeah, so it's the 2 years. So it's exactly the same as last year.
Which was?
Off the top of my head, I believe it's 2,200 a day, but I will confirm that and get it back to you.
Okay, that'd be great. Cause I think one of the things I saw was 84 a day and I got really scared, if I'm honest, if that was the
So
number.
that I do know how to clarify. So in past years, when we had one crew operating in each zone, the way we broke up our invoicing was just so we could keep track of where each crew was. We put a little geo reference on each of the charges. Now in the last 2 seasons, when all crews operate within the same MWPA zone, we just lump it all together. So that's where the 84 comes from. It's all 4 crews in one area. But like I said, I'll confirm that day rate for you.
Okay, thank you. And I guess some of my broader questions, and this is the similar things that I've brought up in the past, but just, I think that, and maybe more specific to my earlier comment about kind of local needs mixed with local staff ability, mixed with everything else, is just kind of recognizing some of these projects end up having much bigger bucks, bang for bucks, if you will, in certain areas because of our ability to staff and support our own programs versus needing the staff and support from the MWPA folks. And so I am still challenged that we're going up $1 million in the MWPA JP-wide overall budget. For San Rafael, that's about a $250,000 hit, right? And that is a significant amount of money. And those are significant projects that we do have to go back and cut from our, from anticipated, pieces there. So I guess want to acknowledge that, but I also think there is opportunity, right? In the same way that we're kind of taking hits at the local level in various ways to kind of say, let's scale that JPA wide budget back enough. And let's also make sure we're setting up because the MWPA staff has a ton on their plate and we're kind of asking them to do even a ton more. And I know in all of our sub meetings, even with the grant program with Josh, like that's going to be a huge lift. And maybe that number is too big for the first year. And maybe we scale that back so we still have more local money to do some of these ground ready projects, particularly the breaks that did not get the priority funding. And we start maybe with a smaller pilot project on direct assistance as an example. Similar, we could scale back chipper days. That I know that's a unique program because it's scaling fiscal years. So we really don't know what next summer we'll need, right? And so maybe that's an opportunity where we can scale that number back now. But if next summer looks like it needs to be, or spring, I guess, prior to the fiscal year, we could reallocate money that wasn't spent on other projects. So I do think there's opportunities there where we can kind of scale back the JPA wide budget to put more money back into those shovel ready on the ground projects, similar to what Jordan's mentioning out in West Marin. And I think all of us have that stuff ready to go and ready to spend big dollars. And certainly the San Rafael San Anselmo shaded fuel break is no exception to, we'll eat every penny we can give it and then some, I'm sure. So that's just kind of the overall comments I have. Thank you.
Sorry about that. You just spurred a light bulb in my head. No, but it's definitely, I think we're all concerned about the countywide, JPA-wide funded proposals. Because I think we all have the same concerns you do of every time there's a countywide proposal, we all see a little less within our funding. Especially for us that start these planning projects early on in the season. I think what we should do as part of our ad hoc committee with the ops, if we can get all of us together, is start looking at what are the countywide, JPA-wide funded proposals that both they're a priority to ops and what are a priority to us, and then come up with what, as a 17-member agency, what the priorities are. Because I think there's definitely competing interests and competing wants and needs from everyone. There may be chipper programs more valuable to one agency or one zone than it is another. And so I think it'd be nice to have that robust conversation with the operations group so that way we can also get on the same page with that. And that's just singling one program out. You know, there's a variety of programs throughout that I feel that provide a tremendous amount of value or filled that gap that wasn't there. For example, Fire Safe Marin filled a tremendous gap in the education and disaster preparedness for a lot of us smaller agencies that didn't have the ability to create a lot of that content. And so we've really relied heavily on them, which I think to their, how can I put it? I've been impressed on the product that's come out of there, just as a public agency, because we've been able to push a lot of our public and members and citizens to that site for one common message throughout the entire county, and it's been vetted. So it's a good program. Is just seeing at what level do we want to fund it.
I think the meeting of both ad hoc groups, if possible, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
Because I think there are just some nuances here. And I think maybe for some of these programs too, looking at opportunities and using Chipper Day or direct assistance as examples where the JPA wide proposal is for the staff to support it and maybe the infrastructure to support it. But then each zone has the ability to put so many dollars into it that kind of meets their needs. So if direct assistance makes more sense in one zone, they can put more money into the direct assistance program to scale it versus a Chipper program, et cetera. Or if it doesn't make sense for a zone or one of the member agencies, they could keep that money back. But that we all agree that there is value and we need to have the staff and the infrastructure to support it. It's just the dollars behind the physical contracted work, if you will, I think vary a lot by area. But those are really detailed conversations that I think would be better served within the ad hoc.
Yeah, I also was hoping to have a joint meeting of both ad hoc subcommittees to talk about the 20%. So I checked with legal counsel and because they're both BRONAC committees, we are not able to do that. Sorry, be a party pooper. Or we could and make it a public meeting that's noticed with an
Yeah.
agenda.
I think that would probably, it would benefit, I think, both the operations committee and the ad hoc committee, excuse me, the ATC committee, to be able to meet in the same room face to face and have these robust conversations. And I believe it probably should be a public meeting. So that way we can at least be recorded of what's being said.
Well, that's definitely something, if it's
Yeah.
a public meeting, that's something that we can look into.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Do we have any comments, questions regarding the 24-25 overall work plan?
Maybe more of a process question, I guess, Anne, at this point. If we want to try to have that additional meeting, are we still voting or are we only voting on the projects in the work plan and not the budget behind them? Or how does our action today need to maybe potentially
My
change?
recommendation would be is for this ad hoc subcommittee be designed for the 25-26 work plan, just because we're so far down the road on this one that I think to be able to stop and restart again, I think wouldn't allow us to have the budget approved by June 1st. That's just I'll leave it up to staff, see what your comments are.
Right. It's pretty tough to get everybody in the same place at the same time. But we're working on it for the ops ad hoc subcommittee right now. I would say, that today's recommendation could include additional, guidance that is conveyed to the operations committee, either in the committee meeting or maybe in some form of writing. I'd have to figure out what the avenue would be there, but there can be additional communication with the ops, as they're making their decisions and finalizing budgets. I just would recommend against trying to get two ad hoc subcommittees in the same place at the same time.
Yeah.
I guess maybe then the conversation, maybe another round robin, I thought that was helpful, is for if there is or isn't support for the JPA wide budget as is, or if the recommendation would be that operations look at opportunities to reduce it to allow there to be more local dollars.
Are we allowed to do a straw poll just to kind of feel the room?
Oh, yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think, yeah, getting an understanding of the ATC's support for that, or what recommendations those would be as a whole. And that could be part of the suite of recommendations to the operations committee.
Okay. Quinn?
I would be in favor of finding opportunities to reduce the JPA wide budget without necessarily eliminating any of the programs. I think all the programs have merit. I think maybe scaling a few of them back especially while we look at more of this data analysis that we're really excited about for other pieces. I think there's some opportunities to do more analysis. So with the similar logic as to returning the 20%, I would suggest we look at returning some of the additional JPA wide back until we have further time to do some data analysis.
Ross or Shannon Selma? Okay. Marshall?
Hey guys, this is Lauren from Fairfax. Just real quick input about that. You know, I mean, one of the challenges that we have as a small community is if we get, you know, additional funding, if it gets broken out into our local community, it's just hard for us to spend it with limited staff. So I do like the idea of a larger organization trying to mitigate, you know, fire issues that benefit our community rather than, you know, turning it back to our own individual community, which makes it difficult for us to use economies of scale.
Thanks.
And I don't have really anything else to say on the matter that hasn't already been said.
I say we keep the funding as it is for this year and then plan on using it for the data we collect this year and maybe possibly figure out a way to reduce those numbers if it works out and for the actual use, we can collect all that data for next year's cycle. Would be where I'm at.
Lynn?
I support all the JPA projects, but I do have some questions regarding the budget and realistically, for example, the direct assistance program. I did some numbers on that. And with $1.1 million, depending on how much you would allocate per project or per homeowner, let's say, if $2,500 each per homeowner, that would be 440 grants. And that's a low ball. We're looking at more like between $35,000 and $4,000 a day for a crew to come in and do some decent work. That would be 275 grants available for the whole county. And one person running that project, from contractors, dealing with the homeowners, making sure that what is removed or modified on someone's property is managed properly. That's a lot of work for one person to be able to handle. And I'll just give you an example. Novato processed 668 grants this past year with 4.5 employees. So that's kind of an example of what it takes. And that was not a project management. That was just managing the grants. So just something to consider if you're going to have just one person for direct assistance projects, which are individual projects, you might want to consider that. So I think we may want to look a little bit deeper into that. And then, of course, I totally support the fire road inventory and assessment. Marin Wildfire has participated in that and all the groundwork for that. So I think that I support all the JPA projects, but I'd like to take a deeper look at the budget for them.
I think, you know, most of us have stayed abreast of these projects. We've had a lot of discussions about them. I'm supportive of the budget in general where it is. I not to say that, you know, the concerns and comments aren't valid. I think they are. I think it'll be important for us to start the discussion about the next fiscal year JPA wide projects like this at our next meeting, not in April of next year. I really think that this needs to be an ongoing discussion for this committee, that we should be, you know, planning a year in advance for any kind of changes to the budget. And there probably, you know, with a year of you know, forethought, there probably are some adjustments and changes we could make. But as of right now, I think what we've got is good on paper, and I support it.
Jim Fox, Inverness.
Yeah, I think I'd go with the support as it is for this year. And certainly everybody, we all need to look at trying to reduce it where it makes sense.
Luke and Marinwood.
Yeah, I agree with what Jim just said.
Dr. Taylor.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we shouldn't do anything hasty, and I think that as a small community, like Lauren said from Fairfax, the small communities in Marin have a different experience, and having a strong central organization to support us is very important.
Stinson?
Yeah, I would agree with what the consensus of the group is do it next year.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think, as I mentioned earlier, we're pretty far down the road when it comes to budgeting. Being a department head and responsible for creating a budget every year, that typically for me starts sometime in December, January. And I start looking at it and projecting out several months ahead of time of what the challenges may be down the road or try to forecast. I think it'd be tough to try to forecast and change a budget within the last 30 days or so. My opinion would be to keep the budget and support the budget as is and follow the recommendation of trying to get together sooner in the year and start talking about JPA wide projects plus the 20% priority funding. And I think that needs to be a conversation that happens all year until we come up with some metrics or guidelines of how that is or how those funds are appropriated.
Okay, thank you for that.
Um,
I'm wondering, does Lynn want a response regarding the direct assistance program and the process that's currently in place to think about workflow and who's supporting? Okay. I'll invite Josh to talk about it a little bit.
First of all, very valid concerns about the scale of that program for one staff member, which is why we've been talking about recently the ways that we can include more MWPA staff members, as well as assistance from individual agencies, the defensible space programs across the county, to kind of build a bigger team. It would be centrally managed by the grant specialist by one person, but in terms of a lot of the workflow and the day-to-day tasks, more than one would be recruited for all those.
Okay. Unless anyone has any further comments or questions, I'd like to entertain a motion. If someone has one. So the options on the table are, one is approve the 24-25 work plan as presented with its budget. With the recommendation of the 20% priority funding to be returned back to the zones that it was allocated. That's one. And then the other option would be is to revisit the existing budget and JPA wide projects and make adjustments. So I'd be happy to entertain a motion on either of those.
I'd like to move that we approve it as proposed currently.
With the 20%.
Well, the first option.
Okay. With the 20% priority funding returning back to its original zones. Okay.
I'll second option one.
Okay, we've got a first and a second. May we have a vote, please?
Absolutely. City Mill Valley,
Yes.
City of San Rafael,
No.
City of Larkspur,
Yes.
County of Marin Fire,
Yes.
Inverness Fire,
Yes.
Kentfield Fire, Marin Wood Community Services District,
Yes.
Muir Beach Community Services District,
Yes.
Nevada Fire District,
Yes.
Sleepy Hollow Fire District,
Yes.
Southern Marin Fire District,
Yes.
Stinson Beach Fire District,
Yes.
Town of Corte Madera,
Yes.
Town of Fairfax,
Town of Fairfax, yes.
Town of Ross,
Yes.
Town of San Anselmo.
Yes.
Okay, since we did have a no vote, we need a tally of how many yes votes and who was the dissenting vote.
We have 15 yes. Sorry, I'm getting text from Martina. 1 no. An abstention from Kentfield. No, 14 yes, 1 no. It's all coming in. Yeah. So 14 yes, 1 no, 1 abstention from Kentfield.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it. Thank you to staff for all the hard work and putting the budget together, and want to thank each member of the ATC committee on getting together and putting their work plans submitted and presented and attending all the ad hoc committees. That takes us to item number 8, committee members' requests regarding future agenda items. Is there any member that would like to request an agenda item for anything for a future meeting?
We don't have any more full ATC meetings scheduled for the time being, but it looks like we are probably going to convene the ATC ad hoc or some form of it over the off season.
Okay, sounds good. We look forward to it.
Yeah.
That takes us to item number 9, meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.